Alrighty, hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Serving Nerve, where we talk about whatever we want, and today we're going to be going through more fat acceptance cringe compilations. So, yeah, let's just get into it.
You shouldn't be eating bread. Why not? Because you're overweight? Over what weight? What do you mean? When you said I'm overweight, so what weight am I over?
Okay, I just have to point this out. 1, if you're overweight, you don't have to cut out all the carbs or not eat bread or not even eat bread with a bunch of butter on it and stuff every now and then. I don't know. I mean, the reality is, this depends on your overall caloric intake, what you're eating, diet and exercise, everything. Personally, I don't think you should severely restrict yourself. But personally, I also think that no matter the body weight you have, you should be eating a pretty healthy diet. You don't want your diet to be 500 slices of bread a day. But if you eat sandwiches and stuff like that, and you also eat a host of other carbohydrate-rich products, your body will utilize those carbohydrates. And at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters in the wake of losing weight is your overall caloric balance, your caloric expenditure, being in a caloric deficit. Doesn't mean that you have to be super restrictive and crazy. But this person talking about being overweight and over what weight and stuff like that, it's you are overweight because you have a severe amount of body fat on your body, and also you are over what is considered standardized BMI or standard, overall body mass. And your body is obviously overweight. There's a point where you know when you're overweight. There's a point when other people can see that you're overweight. And there's a point where if you're super overweight and you're not doing anything about it, saying no to certain foods is a good thing. But it just depends, and I don't even believe in people cutting out all the things that they like in their diets. I think the number one thing people should just do is adopt a healthy lifestyle and endeavor to be healthy and also have a positive change in regards to losing weight when they need to lose weight or gaining weight when they need to gain weight. There's a point where you want to have that balance with a little bit of variability here and there, but overall, you want to try and find a healthy weight for your body's height. And I feel like whenever we get into these weird semantics where it's oh, what weight am I over? Oh, overweight. It's dude, you look obese. We can tell. People can tell when you're fat. It's kind of obvious. And it isn't supposed to be an attack on your character or to make you feel like you're a bad person or you're immoral for such or you don't deserve, happiness because you're overweight or you don't deserve to eat bread. It's just an assessment of your overall physical form. And I think people have the right to make that judgment, and you have the right to also understand, hey, yeah, I am overweight. You can do what you want, no matter what your weight is. But at the end of the day, I would say there's a point where you need to understand what is actually going to be, hey, yeah, I'm overweight. There is a point where you just have to understand and accept that you're overweight and either change it or don't, instead of getting into weird semantics and stuff like that.
You're over a healthy weight. How do you know what a healthy weight is? According to the BMI scale, BMI's been proven repeatedly to not be an accurate measurement of health, so over what weight? Over weight! Over what weight?
BMI is something you can use as a general marker to see if you are overweight or underweight or within a normal weight range. There is a little variability with BMI, but at a certain point you do have to understand that BMI and being overweight is a thing. I just can't understand this. What is the threshold here? 200 pounds, 300 pounds, 100 pounds over the body mass index? What is the point? Because I feel there is a threshold here that everybody hits when they become overweight, obese, and or when they become severely underweight and or just generally underweight for their body. There's a point where we can recognize this and other people can recognize it. And the fact that we're arguing about this and going oh yeah, what is considered overweight? I don't ascribe to your systems of being overweight. It's just silly.
You're unhealthy. My doctor says I'm fine.
I don't believe that. I don't believe when they say, oh, my doctor says I'm fine. Your doctor probably would look at you firsthand more than any friend or family member and say, you should probably lose some weight, you're overweight. Your doctor is the first layer of judgment, critical medical judgment when it comes to your body weight. And it's not to be, again, rude to this person. It's just I feel like this person just says the biggest level of baloney that they can possibly spew. And for some reason, they think that it's a decent argument to, break the system. It just doesn't make sense.
But you're overweight. Over what weight?
Let's look at this comment. Okay, I've seen this guy before. I know who you are. I know you. Why is it that I always see the same people in these cringe compilations? Oh, maybe it's because they're talking cringe. Or maybe they're truth seekers, who knows? Anyways, let's just look at this comment. Videos from anti-weight loss fat people only piss you off because you're miserable in your smaller body and think we fat people should be as miserable as you are. I don't know. I think some people probably are miserable and just like to judge. I do feel like some people are willing to judge other people instead of judge themselves when they need to look in on themselves. So I can understand where this person's coming from, but at the same time, I feel a lot of people are just calling you out for something ridiculous you say online, or the ridiculous claims of victimhood that are proclaimed online when it comes to people in the fat acceptance, body positivity communities, and they call that out, and then they say, oh, it's you. You're actually the miserable one. You're skinny and you're miserable, even though you're not ascribing to a system of victimhood that will never, ever give you anything other than dissatisfaction and misery. So I feel like it's so ironic because I'm pretty sure these people say the same kind of crap, but whatever. Anyways, you can't fathom being happy in a body our size, but that's a you problem. Get therapy and leave fat people alone. I mean, the fact that this person has to be hyper defensive and even comments on it kind of makes me feel like maybe they aren't completely satisfied with the circumstances, but that's just my own subjective opinion. I personally think that people should be able to do what they want, but also face the judgments of society whenever they go onto TikTok and make claims, or go onto YouTube and make videos like I'm doing right now. Like, in general, judgment, I think, is a good thing, and people judging you, you have the right to, not listen to those people, ignore them, call them out, do whatever you want. But also, people have the right to make a judgment on you for things that you do, or things that you say, and the weird claims that you make online. I feel like this is just somebody's opinion, though. You have the right to your opinion. And hey, like, if you want to think skinny people are just miserable, and they're miserable because they can't be me and be confident in their bodies or whatever, and they can't live my life and be in my shoes, so they have to call me out and make me feel bad because they actually feel bad. If that's your opinion, go for it, but I feel like it's not quite right. I feel like it's not on the money, because I don't look at these people and envy them, I pity them. So I mean, like, maybe I'm not skinny enough to be able to be miserable enough from this person's perception, but I don't know, man, I think it's just silly.
So I had a doctor's appointment today, and it was a follow-up to the last few weeks had been a little bit of a shit show. Something small happened that ended up causing a couple surgeries, and it turned into being a bigger deal than it needed to be. Part of what happened, though, unfortunately, meant a lot less intake than I would normally have, especially in my recovered life. And my body has really taken a hit because of it. My heart, my blood pressure, all of that. Well, my doctor today asked me what my intake has looked like these last several days. So I did like a 24-hour review of what I'd eaten. And she was like, oh, that's great. She went on to say a couple other things, and she's like, well, good. At least you're not eating pizza.
I'm kind of confused. Like, it sounds like this person has some kind of, like, recovery that they're in for, like, eating issues or something. And they're taking a hit on that mentally because recently they went into some kind of medical intervention, couldn't eat the way that they were trying to eat in recovery or the way they were letting themselves eat, and they're taking a mental hit on that, and they're also taking a physical hit on that. But then they go to the doctor, and then they get even more, like, mentally, like, damning, advice or, like, input, saying, like, oh, that's great, you're, you feel like you're, like this person feels like they're acting on more disorderly behavior or something like that. And then the person who they're like interacting with is saying, oh, that's great, that's great. And their perception right here is, oh, it's great that I'm involving myself with disordered behavior. Oh, that's great. Like, I feel like it's like that. In general, they're not actually explaining what they're eating, though, or anything like that. So it could be a completely reasonable intake, and we just wouldn't know it. And then the doctor, or whoever they are talking with, would be like, oh, yeah, that's a completely normal intake for a normal person. Good for you. Or whatever. But I don't know, man. I don't know. It's all just baloney. There's no, like, real explanation as to what is being eaten and the behaviors this person has. So it's a little bit hard to gauge.
And to that I say,
Oh, wow, spiting your body to spite somebody else who actually just doesn't care. They just treat you like an expendable pawn of a system anyways. It's not like you're valuable to these people. Like, this is the problem I have. It's like, who are you spiting other than yourself by this? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. The doctor doesn't care. They really just don't. Like, medical practitioners, nurses, professionals, they can give you advice and tell you what to do and what not to do. But at the end of the day, they have their own lives and a ton of other patients to look at. So if you're gonna go against the grain and, like, spite them, they're not really gonna care. It's your life to destroy. So I feel like this only spites you, and it's like you one-upping somebody who doesn't care about being one-upped. So it's like almost a useless spite. And it's not like the person you interacted with is going to see it on TikTok. So the only thing that you're really doing by doing this is just showing off your own foolishness to an audience of people who are judging you on TikTok and have now put you in a cringe compilation. Conversations with diet culture. This is actually really good fruit.
Garlic bread is my favorite food.
Fruit is my favorite food. I could honestly eat it for every meal. Or eat it all the time without even stopping. Why is this a conversation with diet culture? I'm just saying, my people, I love fruit. I'm not gonna lie, I have like no fruit in my house right now. I'm basically waiting until like payday before I get a grocery bill, so I have to wait 2 weeks with like slowly decaying apples in a fruit bowl, and I have half a pack of blueberries in my freezer. And that's what I get until payday. So that's awkward.
I could honestly eat it for every meal. Or just eat it all the time without even stopping. You get fat.
Fruit makes you fat? Ah, fuck that shit. Fruit doesn't make you fat. Eat all the fruit you want. Listen, at the end of the day, the amount of fruit you'd have to eat to be in a caloric excess, and the amount of caloric excess that would result in fat gain through de novo lipogenesis through just eating fruit, it's ridiculous. You would have to eat an insane amount of fruits and vegetables every single day. And if you wanted to just eat fruit, I'm not saying it would be nutritionally adequate every single day for all of the nutrition that you'd need, particularly depending on the fruits with mineral intake and also with, protein and fat intake, although technically you could argue that fat is unnecessary if you're trying to lose weight to eat in excess through a dietary means, other than omega-3 fatty acids. Anyways, point I'm trying to make is, omega-3s are an important fatty acid, but most of the time when you're trying to lose weight, your body's like, just give me protein. That's the main thing that I need to keep my body's muscle mass from degrading, to keep me somewhat satisfied. And carbohydrates, in my opinion, are also incredibly important as well, because your body literally, uses them for everything. So I think that carbs and proteins are the superior macronutrients. But saying that, like a diet of fruit, you would have to eat so many calories from fruit and so much of a volume of fruit to actually get fat from it. It would be insane. Like, logically speaking, like an apple has anywhere from 50 to 100 calories. So you'd have to eat like a diet with at least 20 to 40 apples. With bananas, a banana, an average of 100 calories, give or take the size, a few calories here and there. So you'd have to eat 20 bananas to even hit your average person's caloric needs. 10 mangoes, 15 mangoes, something like that. Oranges, 80 calories each? It's just the amount of volume from fruit. If you're talking watermelon, you can eat a whole watermelon and you still probably wouldn't hit your caloric needs for the day. I'm not encouraging people to do this. I'm just saying the diet culture perception of fruit making you fat is a thing, and it's stupid. Eat as many fruits and vegetables as you want. They will only benefit you with the amount of nutrition, antioxidants, phytonutrients, hydration, and overall calorically dilute intake. They're overall, in my opinion, fruit is one of the healthiest things you can eat. And it also gets you to oftentimes stop eating garbage junk food, ice cream and cake and candy. What would you rather do, to lose weight? Eat pie and crave sugar, or just eat, some fruit, or make a fruit salad or something like that. It does actually make a big difference there, so I encourage everybody eats fruit all the time.
That makes you fat. Bread makes you fat?
I mean, I actually do have to agree a little bit with this person. There is a big diet culture myth that just because fruit contains sugar in it, and the sugar in the fruit is typically fructose, that for some reason people have this horrible perception of it. But in general, fruit is a packaged deal. So you've got fiber, antioxidants, phytochemicals, vitamins, nutrition. You've got a big composition of really healthy components in there, and you have the sugar. Sugar is the reason why fruit has energy in it that is derived pretty easily, and also it's the reason why it tastes so good, and it's a package deal. So I actually agree with this person, People have an insane diet culture perception of fruit, but it really shouldn't be demonized. It's one of the healthiest things you can get in on an average basis.
One of the most common questions I get is, how can you say there's no relationship between weight and health? And first of all, virtually nobody is saying that. What I and many other fat activists are...
A ton of people are saying that. A ton of people are saying that. What are you talking about, my dear? A ton of people are saying that all the time. People are saying there's no relation with weight and health. Health at every size. BMI is bullshit. Nobody takes into account blah, blah, blah. But it is true. They all say, like, hey, health has nothing to do with your weight and blah, blah, blah. And it's crazy. It's just psychotic. So you're wrong. I'm not trying to be a jerk. Maybe this person has a great thing they're about to say or some cool advice, but I'm just calling it out. This person's perception of what people are saying is incorrect.
Are saying, and in fact we're begging people to understand this, is that as it stands in the current research, the relationship between weight and health is correlational, not causal. So some research methods 101. When two things are correlated, it means that they're happening at the same time.
Okay, this person's literally going to try and argue that being obese doesn't cause you to have these metabolic diseases. You just happen to be obese when you have these metabolic diseases. So I don't know if they're going to try and argue the inverse of like, oh, these diseases actually cause obesity or something stupid like that. But when we look at the rates of metabolic disease, like diabetes or something, diabetes type 2, amongst the population, and we see that with severely morbidly obese and morbidly obese people, it's incredibly prevalent. There's usually a dietary pattern and a potential causal effect with that correlation. I'm just saying, madam.
It does not mean that one thing is causing the other thing. For example, there's a very strong correlation between male pattern baldness and heart attacks, which is true. Now, based on that information, should we ascertain that baldness causes heart attacks?
Okay, I have to point this out. I'm really curious as to the rates of male pattern baldness and heart attacks, particularly with testosterone and also with steroid injections. I know this is a weird thing to say, okay? But this just crossed my mind, and I don't know how prevalent it is. I'm not trying to proclaim that it's incredibly, prevalent. But having a high amount of testosterone can increase the risks of male pattern baldness. And also, steroid injections increase your testosterone and can increase your risks of male pattern baldness, amongst other things like gynecomastia, increased pectoral tissue, with fat, and also your risks for fatal heart arrhythmias and heart attacks. So I'm wondering what the groups of people they were looking at when they were making that study are. Sorry that I'm going off, but that just crossed my mind, and I know it's all just me throwing a bunch of stuff together. It's not real, but it did just cross my mind, and I wanted to mention it because I thought it would be kind of funny.
Should we try to get bald men to grow hair in an effort to reduce their likelihood of having a heart attack and then blame them when they can't do it?
Also, though, I feel like the older you get, the more likely you are to be bald, and the older you get, the higher at risk you are for, heart attacks and stuff like that, so that might be another reason. I don't know. Again, these are correlations. They're not causal, but there's an argument to be made here in the wake of body fat, how fat you are, how obese you are, and the diseases you might have as a result of such.
No, because what's actually happening is that a third factor seems to be at play, which contributes to both baldness and heart attacks. What I'm suggesting is that we look much more closely at the third factors at play when it comes to weight and health.
What are the third factors? Diet and exercise? Okay. This is the problem. It's these people are so non-specific. They're oh, it's just this omen, this secret disorder that just affects fat people or whatever, or affects people so that they magically become fat and then also get metabolic diseases. It's just they just throw stuff in here. And sometimes it's not that deep. It's pretty simple. And there's a point where you have to recognize, hey, you know what? I'm just not being healthy. I'm treating my body like crap. I'm eating bad food. I'm not exercising. I'm becoming obese as a result, and the food that I'm eating is making me sick and at risk for metabolic disease. If they want to argue that it's diet and exercise causing this situation, it still is a trifecta of variables that still need to be calculated for, even with just weight. I think it's a little bit crazy because it's oh, correlation is not causation, and that's why, and it's all just a big conspiracy to take down fat people. And in reality, I don't think it's that deep, and I think a lot of obese people are doing a series of things to, one, become obese, and also to develop diseases. So I'm just saying, my dudes. I'm just saying, it's not that deep.
For example, fat people frequently have our blood pressure taken with blood pressure cuffs that are too small. The problem with that is that when you use a cuff that's too small, it will always result in a false high reading. And this happens all the time. So these are the kinds of things I think about when someone says that fat people have higher rates of hypertension. I think, of course we do. We are constantly getting false high readings.
Okay, well, what about diabetes and other important diseases that are still measurably higher amongst the obese population. And then also, I just have to point this out, the more body mass you have on you, the higher your blood pressure typically is. It's just part of it. Like, the more body mass, the more your body has to pump blood through your system and keep your heart beating. So I'm just saying, smaller beings have usually lower blood pressures, alright? When I've had a significantly lower body weight, I've had a significantly lower heart rate and a level of blood pressure that is significantly lower than when I've had it at a higher weight. So it just completely depends on the circumstances, but I feel like we're just jumping through hoops here. I don't know. I'm not trying to be a jerk. And, like, sure, that could be an issue. Like, we could get false readings and stuff here and there, but they take your blood pressure, like, 3 to 5 times or whatever at the doctor's office. Whenever I've gotten my blood pressure taken, they take 3 readings at minimum to get an average for the blood pressure. They want to make sure they get it as accurate as possible. But I'm not trying to be a jerk and, like, just, like, bypass that. Maybe that's an actual issue. I just think that, again, just because correlation does not equate causation, the obvious, like, metabolic diseases that can come to obese people are higher than for a normally weighted person.
And more broadly, there are a number of very influential third factors that contribute to the overall trend of health problems for fat people, such as weight stigma, also known as the stress of discrimination.
Okay, yeah, the weight stigma thing where they're like, oh, doctors won't test you for this, this, and this because they think you're just fat, blah, blah, blah. Weight stigma can be a thing, and I think it can happen in either direction with being underweight or overweight. But, yeah, I don't think this defeats the purpose of, like, when you get a study or a series of studies and or we have a series of statistics and we can measure, hey, there is a higher level of metabolic disease amongst the obese. I think it's worthy of looking at, my dude.
That fat people experience a lot. Another is weight cycling. Virtually all fat people have tried to lose weight at some point in our lives, but pursuing weight loss is a virtual guarantee that someone will experience weight cycling, which is extremely hard on the body.
Okay, this I actually agree with. Yo-yo dieting and weight cycling and losing a ton of weight and gaining a ton of weight can be very stressful on the human body because it likes to maintain a level of homeostasis. This actually can happen with a lot of individuals, from the obese to people who are into, like, bodybuilding and, you know, getting shredded for competitions and stuff, to people with severe eating disorders that lose a ton of weight and then have to go into recovery, gain it, lose it, gain it, you know, relapse. It's really bad. It's really bad. This happens quite commonly. It's not good. But again, this is not to justify the fact that you have a higher risk of disease with the obese. This is still a concern. I don't know exactly why this person is trying to throw all this extra stuff in the mix, because this isn't like a false positive here. And I'm also not trying to tell people they should be weight cycling or yo-yo dieting, but, you know, the pursuits of weight loss, some people who are obese do not pursue weight loss. I've had many friends who do not pursue weight loss as an obese individual. They've never pursued it. They've never cared. They've just become obese because they eat crap. I've dealt with a significant sum of people in my life who've done such. So I just think it's ridiculous how they're like, oh, almost, if not all fat people have tried. A lot of them have not.
And finally, we have inaccessible, inequitable, and biased healthcare. Fat people experience all of these things, and all of them contribute to illness. But despite all of these third factors, discrimination, stress, weight cycling, limited healthcare, biased healthcare, incompetent healthcare, and a lack of proper medical equipment, the cultural conversation around weight and health refuses to evolve. People, especially thin people, tend to be very committed to upholding fat phobia. People are just more comfortable believing that fat people do bad things and that leads to bad health, and thin people do good things and that leads to good health.
That's true, though. You know, if you literally eat so much food, you eat an excess of unhealthy food to a point where you become morbidly obese, you are at risk for a higher level of disease, and that is not a good thing. We shouldn't look at it like it's a neutral thing. We should look at it like it's a concern because that person's health is on the line. At the same time, we definitely can have issues with medical malpractice and misconduct. I've dealt with that in Canada before at many weights in my life, and it sucks. And I've also met other people who have dealt with the same things. I'm not trying to just bypass that and be like, oh, you're wrong. But the reality is, like, just because there are all these other things, like, you know, you can't measure it as easily with being obese or whatever, or like the healthcare system's botched, doesn't mean that eating an excessive amount of food and becoming obese is not unhealthy. Like, this is, I just don't understand what this person's talking about anymore, because it's like they're talking about all this stuff, like medical misconduct, all these other variables, but at the end of the day, it still matters if you eat so much food to a point where you become morbidly obese, and you also aren't exercising consistently. Like, I just don't understand exactly what this person's talking about anymore, because the argument is still there. There are other things we can look at as well, but the argument is still there, and it's a measurable argument.
Despite the fact that we know that's very misleading, very stigmatizing, and often untrue. Turns out the pushback that I get on this topic, it's not really about health. was fat phobia all along, guys.
See, that's the problem. So then they throw in fat phobia, and it's like, I'm actually willing to agree with this person. I just think they're actually incorrect, because when you become morbidly obese through consumption and through not exercising, because it does take a caloric excess to become morbidly obese, there's obviously a risk for morbidity. There's obviously a risk for metabolic diseases at that weight, more so than somebody who is not eating excessively and exercising or moving somewhat consistently enough to maintain a normal to lower body weight. It's just obvious. I think it's ridiculous to say that it's fat phobia instead of just like basic logic. I feel like we can make a better argument here. Like, you can argue for all these other things and maybe a form of medical neglect, and that being a concern for people who are overweight to obese, but at the same time, it doesn't really belittle the other arguments being made. So I don't know, man. Maybe I'm misinterpreting this. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm ignorant. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I just think it's silly. I think it's kind of silly. And I think the number one thing that makes it silly is claiming that it's fat phobic. But that's my opinion. Tell me what you think in the comments below, my people. Do you have the same perception? What is your opinion of the medical communities and also like medical misconduct as a morbidly obese individual, what you would face? If you've been morbidly obese, what have you faced in the medical world? And yeah. Anyways, that's the video. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Have you also not been able to even have the like grip around your arm? Because also, like, even when I've had that like blood pressure measuring device around my arm, it gets incredibly tight. It inflates with a significant sum of air and it hurts. It literally hurts. So I don't think it's supposed to be not tight. So I don't know. Anyways, that's the video. Tell me what you think in the comments below, my people, and I will see you all next time. It has been lovely. Slater.